Welcome to one more edition of Politics and Random. Egberto Will is your host. I'm here with the one and only Delilah Agho-Otoghile. Delilah, tell me a little bit about you because, I saw you at a meeting recently and you took that meeting over. You were going to make sure that people in this damn county vote, something that the rest of America ought to see as well. First of all, tell us a little bit about you and also let me know, did I say your name correctly?
Said it correctly. Thank you for asking, Egberto, and for having me. It's been a while since I've been on your show, so much has changed. But we were at that meeting together because I have love for Houston and Texas and want to make sure people are engaged and are voting. Right now, I'm working with a group called Win Justice, which is a collaboration between SEIU, Planned Color Change, and Community Change, running their national field program. And I also, Egberto, earlier this summer started a voter registration nonprofit here in Texas called VoteSimple, where we are investing in some paid digital ads to get folks to register to vote, kind of circumventing the lack of online voter registration in Texas. So that's what I have been up to.
So wait a minute, you formed a 501c3 to actually work on voting as well as a separate organization also?
Yes.
That is great. I mean, I didn't know that, so I want to hear a lot more about that before we get started.
Oh yeah, for sure. This is actually an idea I had late last year. I think the last time we spoke, I was working at Battleground, Texas, did a lot of voter registration there. Did a lot of voter registration in Florida in 2016 with Hillary's campaign. But here in Texas, the state is so big and we have such a huge gap in registering young people and registering voters of color. Despite all of our efforts to register people of color, our voter file, right, like the people who are registered in Texas is still over 70% white. And we estimate that there's roughly 4 million unregistered people of color in Texas who need a nudge registering them to vote. So what better way than to find those people online, whether they're like scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or whatever, if they see an ad prompting them to register. We're working with vote.com so that when they click on our ad, they fill out the form. We then send that pre-filled out form to their house. They just have to sign it, drop it back in a postage paid envelope, and they get registered to vote. So also kind of removing some of the barriers. There's some process online through other groups where if you fill out a form, you have to print that form and mail that form back. And I don't know how many people have access to a printer or even envelopes and stamps. I don't have envelopes and stamps in my house. So we're just trying to make it easier, right? Because I think that the more accessible, from registering to vote, but even like voting, the more accessible all these things are, the easier they are, we'll have more people who are engaged and hopefully change the landscape.
Well, Texas, they've always said the problem with us is we're a non-voting state. Now, your 501c3, is it specific to Texas or is it throughout the country?
Specific to Texas. We're starting with Texas now. Care about Texas. Want to see what we could do here.
Well, by the way, you give us a name again and tell people how they can get there so they can kind of help you guys out if necessary.
Yeah, it's VoteSimple is the name of the organization. So our website is www.votesimple.org. So you can register to vote there. You can also check your registration there, which I would encourage everyone to do before the deadline on October 5th, so that if you're planning to vote, that you make sure that your registration is active and accurate, and you won't have any problems when you go to the polls in November.
Well, that is very important, Delilah. It is, especially in a state like Texas, because I've been predicting that we are going blue this cycle. I'm not even waiting for 22 or waiting for 24. I'm saying we have the potential to do it now with young activists like yourselves out there doing all this stuff. I didn't even know I know that you were at HCDP doing your thing there, but I didn't know that you had this other thing going on. I am impressed.
It's been on me, Egberto.
I think it's great.
Years. I'm kidding. I'm glad. Thank
you. Anyhow, let's talk a little bit about your thoughts on millennials, and because I was doing some calculations, and if we get millennials and Gen Zs out, they overpower every particular group. Baby boomers, they overpower Gen Xers, they overpower every other group. That combination. I interviewed a young man a couple days ago, not a few weeks ago, but I played it yesterday, where he said, the folks in my age range, the 23-year-olds, we have it that this is the one election you got to go out there and vote. And I was impressed because this is a young guy, and that's what he was saying. It's already instilled in them. Do you feel that, you being an expert, do you feel that out there, or what?
Yeah, I mean, I think that more people are paying attention to politics now than ever before, and I think that that's probably the case across like all generation groups. I would say, I mean, we saw unprecedented increases in youth turnout in 2018. I think we've seen unprecedented increases in turnout in this past primary election, right? Both here in Texas in March, and then again in the runoff in July. And I think that a lot of young people like feel, what's at stake, probably more so than others. I think that there are some young people who maybe feel uninspired, or maybe feel like their views aren't being represented, right? Or maybe feel like their vote doesn't matter. But I'm not sure that regardless of like those views, that they still won't show up to vote. I think they will show up to vote, and I think that they're eager to vote, right? Now that I think that they probably understand the power of their vote, and will make sure to exercise that right.
Well, there are two things here. We selected El Senor Biden, and we also selected Kamala Harris as the vice presidential candidate. Many of the young people, I think, may go under the pretext that they're not necessarily as progressive as they want. What is the selling message to young people that they can tie in with the current Democratic ticket? I mean, young people suffer from school, what do you call school loan, school debt, and a lot of these other issues that we don't know, is the ticket necessarily progressive enough on those particular issues to make these kids want to, I'm calling them kids, sorry for that, for making these young adults want to go out there and, not go to the bar, but go to, well, in coronavirus days, there's not much bars, right? But, go out there and vote.
Yeah, I think, I mean, progressive, right? Like, I don't know if we want to necessarily argue where Biden and Harris like fall on the scale, because they are candidates who are out of this primary season. But I think that when we are weighed with Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, that people will make the right decision. I think that I think a lot of young people care, like you were saying, about education. I think they care about financial security. They probably care about healthcare right now. I think a lot of them care about racial justice, and this movement that we've seen happening over these last few months. And I think that there are only two candidates who like are on the right side of all of those issues, right? And maybe they don't agree with everything that a particular like voter cares about, but I think that they would fight, for change in those issues more than our current president would. I would think that millennials are probably a little bit more interested in their actions, right? In your actions as a candidate's actions, and maybe more concerned about policy stances than like party. So maybe they don't feel a strong allegiance to the Democratic Party, but I would say that they also don't feel connected to the Republican Party, right? But they will end up voting for the candidate who is more authentic and aspirational, and is encouraging them to get engaged, but it's also making them feel like they're being listened to because they are doing something about racial justice, or they actually have plans on how we could come out of this pandemic better than we are right now. So yeah, I think that they may not be as progressive than people wanted them to be. I am thrilled, though, that they are at the top of our ticket. I am thrilled that we have a Black woman who is our Democratic vice president nominee, and I think that young people will get out and support them.
Now, Delilah, you gave me the educated answer. Good thing. A very educated answer. My next question to you, especially since you're drumming up the vote now, is not most voters are not, and I'm not talking. This is not even a progressive, conservative kind of an issue. You went through a whole lot of very intelligent machinations to describe that. Look, you only to put it bluntly, your machination was you only have two choices. Are you going to take your? But in reality, they have three choices, and that is one is to stay home, and right.
Yeah.
And there's another reality as well, and that is, are we as as people that are really needing all these people out there to go vote for the Biden Harris ticket, which all of us support, no matter what our inclinations are. Are we doing the necessary actions? In other words, are we forming a message to tell them, not in as an not as in an eloquent manner in which you stated, but in a way that hits them so hard that makes them want to go out there and get that vote. I mean, and make that vote.
For sure.
Make it inconvenient.
Did you watch the convention at all?
Yes, I loved it. Actually, I loved the Obama speech, both of them. I actually loved Biden's speech, which I didn't expect to like at all. And I also loved. There's one other speech that I loved. I can't remember who it was, but I sat there and I'm like, that looked good. Unfortunately, a lot of folks didn't watch it.
Yes. Yeah. No, I hear you. I think that was what came across all of the speeches at convention, right? Which I think is the message voters need to, especially young voters, probably to, propel them to the polls is this message of like unity and hope. And I think that it's like very clear, Egberto, that we need a leader, right? Like we're going through this racial justice movement. We are living through a pandemic, and we do not have anyone in government. We don't have anyone in leadership who I think that people feel like they can trust or feel like they can look to, right, for how we move forward from this. I would think that I actually really enjoyed Joe Biden's speech as well. I think he projected decency and expertise, and I think that he came across as presidential. And I think that the more people hear from him, right, like the broader his reach is, I would think that would move folks to go vote for him.
No, I want to make a comment, because in this respect, listening to you as and what you're all about. I would like the young folk right now to hear the message that go out there and vote for Biden and Harris, but do remember that it is all about you. You are the ones who are going to make legislation after he becomes president, and that's and he will listen to you, while he won't listen while a Trump or whatever. I don't hear the message. What I hear is, I am voting for Biden, the Biden Harris ticket, but I'm also a very progressive person, but the message that I'm giving to the folks that follow me, who are not necessarily very enthused with the ticket, is to tell them, but you have to remain engaged, and we are going to fight as much as we are right now, and we are more likely to make headway with the ticket that we have. I hear too much adoration and not enough action, as far as this is a plan. This is step one is doing this. Step two is action after this.
I would agree. And I think that, I think that's important. I think it's important, though, to hold all elected officials and public officials accountable, right? Because I think if young people actually realize, the issues we care about and who has control over affecting and impacting those issues, then it wouldn't just be about the presidential election every 4 years, right? Are we engaged with these down ballot races? Are we engaged with our countywide public officials, our congresswomen, our congressmen, our state representatives and everyone else? So yeah, I would agree that that we need to make sure that they understand that they have some control in holding them accountable for their own agenda. But I also think that starts a little closer to home. And I would think that, you know, we have some great candidates running in Harris County and in Texas.
Oh, yes.
Those candidates also inspire folks to get out to vote, right? So whether or not they really believe in, you know, flipping their state house seat or their congressional district, if they're going to vote for those candidates, then I'm sure they'll also be compelled to vote for Biden and Harris.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about social media, because I think right now things are very smooth. And I'm a sort of a social media fiend as well. And what I know is coming is the misinformation campaign. And the misinformation campaign is real. In other words, there's a whole lot of stuff that that's going to be going into the feed of our folks that's going to look pretty real for both Biden and Harris. What is, if not the party, what are organizations that you work with doing to counteract the message, or even preempt the message? I would have liked to start seeing by now messages that say, be prepared to get a lot of misinformation in your box coming from the other side. Please get your, I would like to see some preemption as opposed to defensive moves.
Yeah, for sure. I think misinformation is real. I think voter suppression is real. I think we saw elements of it across the country and, you know, this primary season. And I think that everyone from the party to different organizations are preempting, you know, our actions for how we deal with that this fall. But I think the message really has to be rooted in, you know, like positive messaging around all these issues. So we don't want to, like, for instance, when you encourage people to vote early, right? Because maybe there are long lines on election day. We don't tell people to vote early to avoid long lines. We tell people to vote early because that's the best way to support your candidate, right? Or if you vote early, like that's the best way, you know, to support the Democratic ticket, or we root it in a positive message, as opposed to vote early because if you don't vote early, you might be standing in line.
Let me stop you a second. I want to stop you a second because I want some validation for that. You said rooted in a positive message. Let me push back a bit. Don't people sort of react more actively for when they're in fear? It's a question. I don't know.
Do people react? Say that one more time.
In other words, in other words, how best to get you to the ballot? Fear or love?
No, I think it's love. I think it's love.
Okay.
I think that there are some people who can be motivated by fear. And honestly, Berto, I think that's more so like me and you. I think those are probably more of like the activists, the politicos of the world. But I think if we're talking about the majority of the electorate, if we scare them into doing something, I think they will not take that action. Okay. I think I would say there's probably been some studies that show that. I think that people need to aspire, right, to do something, or they need to feel inspired to take an action, as opposed to, if I don't take this action, then it will lead to X, Y, and Z. So we need to be leading with the positive messaging, right? Like we don't tell people here in Texas that there are all these ways that our government has made registering to vote or voting difficult compared to everywhere else. Like we're one of the few states not sending out applications to every registered voter. But Democrats aren't telling people that, right? Like instead we're telling you how easy it is to vote by mail, or how easy it is to vote early now that it's been extended a week early. So yeah, I think we have to lead with
I guess I can see that if you take a level of stress off when it comes to voting. Don't say, oh, it's so difficult to vote. This is how you do it. I guess you're saying, I'm telling you how to do it, as opposed to saying it's difficult, so we have to go through these different hoops to get through it.
Yes, exactly. And I think back to your first question, we, you know, to combat misinformation, we'll just make sure that there's lots of voter education happening, I think, across all mediums. So whether that's on social media, whether that's like through mail or radio or, you know, TV ads or text or phone calls, I think anytime, you know, a progressive organization, a Democratic candidate is interacting with a voter, they will make sure that that voter has all the information they need to vote. So whether that's voting by mail or voting early or voting on election day, I think that we have to make sure that we are constantly educating folks about voting.
That is excellent. Now, here's the most difficult question, and I ask this one to absolutely everybody that I interview, and it goes as follows. What do you wish I had asked you that in my incompetence I did not ask you?
We didn't really talk about the local political landscape here. I think those are the two things I would say.
Well, let's go ahead and do that.
Let's go ahead. Where should we start? With the convention?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I shared some of my thoughts on the speeches. I thought that, for this to be an all virtual convention, though, it was great. I thought it was very well executed and produced. I just have concerns. I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, right? About how we bring in new people to like the party infrastructure, right? Or the party. And whether or not younger people, millennials, Gen Z feel like they are connected to the party. I don't really think that's the issue, but I do think that we have to, have this concerted effort to like break down structures and systems that I would say, Berto, are rooted in white supremacy and patriarchy that keep people from participating in the party. And I think that government is critical, right? If we want to move towards a more participatory democracy, that we have to make this more accessible. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying about voting. Like we talk about making voting more accessible and making it easier for folks to vote so that we increase engagement levels. But I think we should do the same when we think about how we set up our party and our party infrastructure and our party leadership or anything else. Because if we need to break down some of these barriers. And I think that everything's kind of just been running the same way, and that hopefully there will be a day when, our party and especially our leadership is more reflective, I think, of the electorate.
Let me, before you talk about the local politics that you wanted to talk about, I think you hit it on the nail, hit the nail on the head. I think we have been poor as Democrats in creating a deep bench. I think that if you take a look at the leadership from Congress all the way down, that the average age is likely over 70 is a problem. I would have loved to see people like yourself, young millennials, getting up there and becoming leaders in the party. I think that is so important. And I think, like I used to tell all my Berniacs, don't complain. What you go out there and do is take over, like you are doing.
There you go. Yes. And I love the Democratic Party. I'm a proud Democrat. But I think we have to, improve our party and work on some things.
Yeah. Well, I think most of us here are Democrats. But again, that doesn't mean that you don't go ahead and fight for what's important. And what you just said is it's very important. Okay, tell me a little bit about the local landscape.
What do you want to know about?
No, the local landscape. Let's go ahead and put that in the context of Harris County, which is a representative county for the entire country, actually. So, yeah. What are your thoughts on that? In other words, we have. I forgot the name of the congressperson that Kalkani or whatever that's doing.
Sri Kulkarni.
Sri, yeah, I've interviewed him several times as well, and
Shree's great. I think that's actually a great place to start. I think we have a lot of potential to elect young progressives of color. I mean, Shree, right, would be more representative of Fort Bend than Harris County, but Fort Bend's great. I grew up in Fort Bend, one of the most diverse counties in America. I also think we have folks like Christian Menifee running for county attorney, a young Black man, very progressive, who would control civil issues in the county. just appointed Chris Hollins. We already have Judge Hidalgo. I think that people like Agho-Otoghile really inspired me for change in Harris County as well. We have a lot of Democratic state reps in Houston, but I don't think that all of those state reps are necessarily the state reps that push for progressive change, during session in Austin. So I'm excited to see people like Agho running. I think that, she'll win. I would love to see what she puts forth next session. I would really love to see too, you didn't ask me this though, but I would love to see a Representative Egberto kind of spearhead changing our election code in Texas, because it is archaic and it is nothing is really clear. It's very gray, and I think it's led to a lot of issues we've had with local elections. Case in point, we still don't have a city council member in District B, right?
It's amazing, isn't it?
Council member, correct. In the blackest, one of the poorest districts in Houston. To say the blackest district going through a racial justice movement is unrepresented in city council, is insane. But unrepresented because of this election code that allowed a third place finisher to challenge the election in the first place, when maybe if our election code was a little more updated and a little more clear, we would have had this election on December 14th of last year and District B would be represented. So when I think about how, I don't know, and I think in this day and age, right, we're going through this modern day age for voting rights, but we cannot fight to protect voting rights if we have this election code that is so outdated and causes problems here. So.
Delilah Agho-Otoghile, thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right. We got to make this a more frequent thing, because you are one of our rising stars, not only in the movement, but in the party. Please keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right, an independent news program. I post several news videos of interest every day. I ask you so kindly to subscribe to my channel, and please leave me some comments. Thank you very much.